The bullies never expected this fighter to steal their hearts. Now they regret everything. Marcus Rivera stood at the entrance of Westfield High, clutching his worn backpack straps as students flowed around him like water around a stone. At 17, he was thin and lanky, with olive skin that seemed to make him invisible in crowds. His dark hair fell across his forehead, partially hiding brown eyes that held secrets no one bothered to discover. The September morning air carried the scent of freshly cut grass and teenage anxiety, a combination that made his stomach churn as he took his first steps into what he hoped would be a fresh start. Moving from Phoenix to this small Oregon town had been his mother's idea after his father's job transfer. Marcus had left behind friends, familiarity, and the underground boxing gym where he'd spent 3 years learning to channel his anger into precise combinations and devastating footwork. His trainer, Rico, had been like a second father, teaching him that true strength came from discipline and knowing when not to fight. "The deadliest weapon is the one that stays in its holster," Rico always said. And Marcus had internalized that wisdom so deeply it had become part of his DNA. The hallways of Westfield High buzzed with the energy of reunited friends and new school year excitement. Marcus navigated through clusters of students, their conversations washing over him in waves of unfamiliar names and inside jokes. He found his locker, number 247, wedged between a cheerleader's shrine of photos and a football player's collection of energy drink cans. As he fumbled with the combination, he became aware of eyes watching him from across the hall. Tyler Jameson stood 6 feet tall, with the kind of blonde hair and blue eyes that seemed crafted for teenage movie posters. His varsity jacket hung perfectly on broad shoulders, and everything about him screamed confidence, born from never being told no. Flanking him were his lieutenants, Connor Hayes, a stocky redhead with freckles and a mean streak, and Jake Morrison, lean and wiry with the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. They were the kind of boys who had ruled their elementary school playgrounds and never learned that the world didn't revolve around their whims. But it wasn't just Tyler that caught Marcus's attention. Standing beside him, laughing at something he'd whispered, was the most beautiful girl Marcus had ever seen. Emma Sullivan had auburn hair that caught the fluorescent lights like fire, green eyes that sparkled with intelligence, and a smile that could stop traffic. She wore a simple blue sweater that somehow looked designer on her frame, and when she laughed, the sound carried across the hallway like music. Marcus felt his heart skip a beat, then forced himself to look away, knowing that girls like Emma didn't notice boys like him. The first week passed in a blur of new teachers, confusing schedules, and the constant effort of trying to blend into the background. Marcus ate lunch alone in the corner of the cafeteria, reading worn paperbacks and pretending not to notice the social hierarchies playing out around him. He observed Tyler's crew holding court at the center table, their voices carrying across the room as they planned weekend parties and discussed upcoming football games. Emma sat with them, but Marcus noticed she often looked uncomfortable when Tyler's jokes turned cruel or when his friends made fun of other students. It was during the second week that Tyler first noticed Marcus. The new kid had been walking to his chemistry class when Tyler stepped directly into his path, flanked by Connor and Jake. The hallway seemed to part around them, other students instinctively creating space for whatever was about to unfold. "Hey there, new guy," Tyler said, his voice carrying false friendliness. "I don't think we've been properly introduced. I'm Tyler, and this is my school." Marcus looked up at him, recognizing the territorial posturing for what it was. "Marcus," he replied simply, trying to step around them. Connor moved to block his path. "Where are you going so fast, Marcus? Don't you want to chat with your new friends?" "I don't want any trouble," Marcus said quietly, his voice steady despite the familiar surge of adrenaline. His hands remained relaxed at his sides, but his weight shifted slightly onto the balls of his feet. A subtle preparation Rico had drilled into him countless times. Tyler laughed, a sound that held no warmth. Trouble? Who said anything about trouble? We're just being welcoming. He reached out and flicked Marcus's ear, hard enough to sting. See? Friendly. The flick was nothing. Marcus had taken punches that would have floored most people, but the public humiliation burned hotter than any physical pain. Students had stopped to watch, their faces showing the mixture of fascination and horror that came with witnessing a predator toying with its prey. Marcus felt his jaw clench, felt the familiar fire building in his chest, but Rico's voice echoed in his memory. The moment you fight someone weaker than you, you become the bully. So Marcus did nothing. He stood there, absorbed the humiliation, and waited for them to get bored. After what felt like hours but was probably only seconds, Tyler stepped aside with an exaggerated bow. "See you around, Marcus," he said, emphasizing the name like it was a joke. That afternoon, Marcus found himself in the school gym during his free period, drawn by the rhythmic thud of speed bags and the familiar scent of sweat and rubber mats. The coach, a grizzled man named Pete Williams, looked up from his clipboard as Marcus entered. "You looking to join the team, son?" Coach Williams asked, taking in Marcus's lean frame with an experienced eye. "Just wondering if I could use the gym sometimes," Marcus replied. "I like to work out." Coach Williams nodded toward the equipment. "Long as you clean up after yourself and don't get in the way of team practice, knock yourself out. What's your background?" "Boxing," Marcus said simply. The coach's eyebrows rose slightly. "Where'd you train?" "Ramirez's gym in Phoenix. 3 years." "Ramirez's?" Coach Williams' voice carried new respect. "I know that place. Serious fighters come out of there." He studied Marcus more carefully. "You any good?" Marcus shrugged. "Good enough." Over the following weeks, Marcus established a routine. He'd arrive at the gym during lunch or after school when the football team wasn't practicing. He'd wrap his hands, work the heavy bag, practice his footwork, and lose himself in the familiar rhythm of training. It was the only time he felt truly himself, when the careful mask of invisibility could slip away and he could remember who he really was. Meanwhile, Tyler's campaign of harassment escalated. It started small. Shoulder checks in the hallway, knocking books from Marcus's hands, loud comments about his clothes or his lunch. Marcus endured it all with quiet dignity, but inside, he was cataloging every slight, every moment of humiliation. His training intensified, each session on the heavy bag accompanied by mental images of Tyler's smirking face. The breaking point came on a Friday in October. Marcus was walking through the courtyard, trying to find a quiet spot to eat his lunch, when he heard Emma's voice raised in anger. "Stop it, Tyler! That's not funny!" Marcus looked up to see Tyler and his crew surrounding a freshman boy named David Kim, a small Korean kid with thick glasses and a stutter. Tyler had David's backpack and was dumping its contents onto the ground, while Connor and Jake laughed. Emma stood nearby, her face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "Come on, Em," Tyler said, not looking at her. "We're just having some fun with little Davy here." "Giving him a hard time isn't fun," Emma snapped. "It's cruel." Tyler finally looked at her, his expression darkening. "Since when do you care about losers like him?" "Since I started dating someone who's becoming one," Emma shot back. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Tyler's face went red, and for a moment, Marcus thought he might actually hit Emma. Instead, he turned his rage on David, grabbing the smaller boy by the shirt and lifting him off the ground. "This is your fault," Tyler snarled. "You got my girlfriend all upset." That's when Marcus moved. He didn't think about it, didn't weigh the consequences. He just acted. In 3 quick strides, he was beside Tyler, his hand closing around the bigger boy's wrist. "Let him go," Marcus said quietly. Tyler turned, his eyes wide with surprise. "What did you say to me?" "I said let him go." Marcus's voice remained calm, but his grip tightened on Tyler's wrist. "Now." Tyler released David, who scrambled backward, gathering his scattered belongings. But Tyler's attention was now fully focused on Marcus, and the fury in his eyes promised violence. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life," Tyler said, his voice low and dangerous. Marcus released Tyler's wrist and stepped back, his hands returning to his sides. "Maybe, but I can live with it." The confrontation might have ended there, but Connor chose that moment to sucker punch Marcus from behind. The blow caught him in the kidney, sending a spike of pain through his side. Marcus stumbled forward, and Jake took the opportunity to kick his legs out from under him. Marcus hit the ground hard, his palms scraping against the concrete. "That's what you get for sticking your nose where it doesn't belong," Tyler said, his voice carrying satisfaction. He looked around at the crowd of students who had gathered to watch, his eyes finally finding Emma. "And that's what happens to anyone who thinks they can tell me what to do." The message was clear. Emma's face had gone pale, but she said nothing as Tyler stalked away, Connor and Jake following like faithful dogs. The crowd dispersed quickly, leaving Marcus alone on the ground with his humiliation and his bleeding palms. That night, Marcus didn't go home immediately after school. Instead, he made his way to the gym, where he spent 2 hours working the heavy bag until his knuckles were raw and his shirt was soaked with sweat. Coach Williams watched him from across the room, saying nothing, but taking note of the intensity that seemed to radiate from the quiet boy. Over the weekend, Marcus made a decision. He'd tried to stay invisible, tried to avoid conflict, but Tyler had made it clear that wasn't an option. Monday morning, he arrived at school with a new purpose. He would still avoid unnecessary confrontation, but he would no longer be a victim. The change was subtle, but noticeable. Marcus walked with his shoulders back, his chin up. He made eye contact when Tyler tried to stare him down. He didn't seek out conflict, but he didn't flinch from it either. And every day after school, he trained harder than ever, preparing for the confrontation he knew was coming. Emma began to notice him too. She'd catch him looking at her in the hallway, and instead of looking away, she'd offer a small smile. When Tyler made cruel jokes at lunch, she'd glance at Marcus as if seeking his reaction. The dynamic between her and Tyler grew increasingly tense, their arguments becoming more frequent and more public. The final straw came 3 weeks later. Marcus was walking to his car in the parking lot after school when he heard shouting from behind the gym. He found Tyler pressing Emma against the brick wall, his face inches from hers. "You think you're too good for me now?" Tyler was saying, his voice slurred with alcohol from whatever he'd been drinking during lunch. "You think you can just walk away?" "Let go of me, Tyler," Emma said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "I don't think so," Tyler replied. "We're going to settle this right now." Marcus didn't hesitate. He crossed the distance between them in 4 quick strides and tapped Tyler on the shoulder. When the bigger boy turned, Marcus's fist was already moving. The punch caught Tyler square in the jaw, snapping his head back and sending him stumbling away from Emma. "She told you to let go," Marcus said calmly. Tyler stared at him, blood trickling from his split lip. "You're dead, Rivera. You're absolutely dead." "Maybe," Marcus said, "but not today." Tyler started toward him, but Emma grabbed his arm. "Stop it, Tyler. Just stop." Tyler shook her off, but the moment of hesitation had given Marcus time to assess the situation. Connor and Jake were approaching from behind, and a crowd of students was gathering. This was going to be public, and it was going to be decisive. "You want to do this here?" Marcus asked, rolling his shoulders to loosen the tension. "In front of everyone?" Tyler looked around at the crowd, at Emma, at the phone cameras that were already recording. His pride wouldn't let him walk away, but Marcus could see the uncertainty in his eyes. Tyler was used to picking on people who wouldn't fight back. "I'm going to break you," Tyler said, but his voice lacked its usual confidence. Marcus just nodded. "Come on then," Tyler charged, leading with a wild haymaker that Marcus slipped easily. The punch sailed past his ear, and Marcus stepped inside Tyler's guard, landing a sharp hook to his ribs. Tyler gasped and stumbled backward, and Marcus followed up with a straight right that caught him in the solar plexus, doubling him over. Connor rushed in from the side, but Marcus had been expecting it. He pivoted, caught Connor's wrist, and used the bigger boy's momentum to send him crashing into a parked car. Jake hesitated, suddenly understanding that they had vastly underestimated their opponent. Tyler was back on his feet, his face red with rage and embarrassment. "Hold him!" he shouted to Jake, who reluctantly grabbed Marcus from behind. With his arms pinned, Marcus couldn't dodge Tyler's next punch, which caught him in the stomach. But instead of doubling over, Marcus drove his heel down hard on Jake's instep, causing him to release his grip with a yelp of pain. Free again, Marcus ducked under Tyler's follow-up swing and came up with an uppercut that snapped Tyler's head back. The bigger boy staggered, his eyes unfocused. Marcus could have finished him then, could have put him down with a combination that would have left him unconscious. Instead, he stepped back and waited. "Had enough?" Marcus asked quietly. Tyler wiped blood from his nose, his chest heaving. "This isn't over." "It is, if you want it to be," Marcus replied. "But if you come at me again, I won't hold back." The crowd was silent, phones recording every moment. Emma stood at the edge of the circle, her eyes wide with amazement and something else, something that looked like admiration. Tyler looked around at the faces surrounding him, at the obvious respect in their expressions as they looked at Marcus, and seemed to deflate. "Whatever," he mumbled, then turned and walked away, Connor and Jake limping after him. The crowd began to disperse, but Emma remained. She approached Marcus slowly, her green eyes studying his face. "Thank you," she said simply. Marcus shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. "He shouldn't have been grabbing you like that." "No," Emma said, stepping closer. "He shouldn't have, and neither should anyone else." She paused, then added, "I broke up with him yesterday." "Good," Marcus said, then immediately felt his face burn. "I mean, if that's what you wanted." Emma smiled, and the expression transformed her face completely. "It is. It definitely is." She reached out and touched his arm. "Walk me to my car?" As they walked across the parking lot together, Marcus felt like he was floating. The weight of months of humiliation and fear had lifted from his shoulders, replaced by something lighter and infinitely more precious. Emma chatted easily beside him, asking about his boxing training, his old school, his plans for the future. "I watched you sometimes," she admitted as they reached her car. "In the gym, you're really good." "You were watching me?" Marcus asked, surprised. "Hard not to," Emma said, blushing slightly. "You're very focused when you train. It's attractive." Marcus felt his heart skip a beat. "Maybe you'd like to grab coffee sometime. I could tell you about Phoenix, and you could tell me about this place." "I'd like that," Emma said, her smile growing brighter. "I'd like that a lot." As she drove away, Marcus stood in the parking lot, watching her taillights disappear around the corner. The October air was crisp against his skin, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and the promise of winter. But inside, he felt warm and alive in a way he hadn't in months. The following Monday, the hallways of Westfield High felt different. Students nodded to Marcus as he passed, some offering tentative smiles or small waves. Tyler and his crew were notably absent from their usual spots, and the atmosphere in the cafeteria was lighter, less tense. Marcus found himself sitting with Emma and her friends, laughing at their jokes and contributing to their conversations. "So what's the secret?" asked Sarah, one of Emma's closest friends. "How did you learn to fight like that?" Marcus glanced at Emma, who squeezed his hand under the table. "My trainer back in Phoenix taught me that fighting isn't about being the strongest or the meanest. It's about being smart, being patient, and knowing when to act." "And when not to act," Emma added, understanding flickering in her eyes. "That too," Marcus agreed. The hardest part isn't learning how to fight, it's learning when you should. Tyler eventually returned to school, but he was different. The swagger was gone, replaced by a wariness that followed him through the halls. He gave Marcus a wide berth, and when their eyes met, there was no challenge in his gaze, only a kind of grudging respect. The dynamic had shifted permanently, and everyone knew it. Coach Williams approached Marcus after one of his training sessions, a proposal in his eyes. "I've been thinking about starting a boxing club," he said. "Interested in helping me coach?" Marcus considered the offer, then nodded. "I'd like that, but I want to teach them the same things my trainer taught me." "What's that?" "That real strength comes from protecting people, not hurting them. That the best fight is the one you don't have to have." Coach Williams smiled. "Sounds like you learned from a good man." "The best," Marcus agreed. As winter settled over Westfield, Marcus found himself settling into a new life. He and Emma had become inseparable, their relationship built on mutual respect and genuine affection. The boxing club had grown to include a dozen students, ranging from kids who'd been bullied to kids who'd done the bullying, all learning the same lessons about discipline and self-control. One evening, as he was leaving the gym after practice, Marcus found Tyler waiting by his car. The bigger boy looked uncomfortable, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. "Rivera," Tyler said, his voice lacking its old arrogance. "Tyler," Marcus replied neutrally, his body automatically shifting into a ready stance. Tyler noticed the movement and held up his hands. "I'm not here to fight. I wanted to say something." Marcus waited. "I was a dick," Tyler said finally. "To you, to Emma, to a lot of people. I don't expect you to forgive me or anything, but I wanted you to know that I know." Marcus studied Tyler's face, looking for signs of deception, but found only genuine regret. "What changed?" Tyler was quiet for a long moment. "Watching you with Emma, seeing how she looks at you. I never had that, you know. I thought I did, but I was just taking. You actually care about her." "I do," Marcus said simply. "Yeah, I can see that." Tyler kicked at a loose piece of gravel. "She's happier now. I can see that too." They stood in silence for a moment, two young men who had found themselves on opposite sides of a conflict neither had fully understood. "For what it's worth," Tyler said finally, "I'm glad you stood up to me. I needed someone too." Marcus nodded. "We all need someone to stand up to us sometimes." As Tyler walked away, Marcus felt the last piece of his old anger dissolve. The boy who had arrived at Westfield High scared and alone was gone, replaced by someone stronger, more confident, and more at peace with himself. He had learned that true strength came not from the ability to hurt others, but from the courage to protect them. And sometimes that meant protecting them from themselves. The spring dance was held in the gymnasium, transformed with streamers and twinkling lights into something magical. Marcus, wearing his father's old suit, watched Emma descend the stairs in a blue dress that matched her eyes. She was radiant, her smile lighting up the room as she took his arm. "You clean up nice," she said, adjusting his tie. "You're perfect," Marcus replied, meaning every word. As they danced, surrounded by their classmates and friends, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought him to this moment. He had learned that running from conflict only delayed the inevitable, that standing up for yourself and others was sometimes the only choice that mattered. He had discovered that real strength came not from the power to destroy, but from the wisdom to know when to use that power and when to hold back. Most importantly, he had learned that the best victories were the ones that transformed everyone involved, turning enemies into allies and bullies into better people. The scared, lonely boy who had walked through Westfield's doors 8 months ago was gone, replaced by someone who understood that true courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was the decision to do what was right, despite that fear. As the music swelled around them, Marcus pulled Emma closer, grateful for the twisted path that had led him to this moment, to this girl, to this life. Sometimes the worst things that happened to you turned out to be the best things that could have happened, and sometimes the people who hurt you the most ended up teaching you the most important lessons of all. The dance floor was full of couples, but Marcus only had eyes for Emma, her laughter mixing with the music as they spun together under the lights. This was what happiness felt like, he realized, not the absence of conflict, but the presence of something worth fighting for.